Hello, I'm Ivan Light, author of Deadly Secret of the Lusitania. And people have asked me, what's a deadly secret? And what was the deadly secret of the Lusitania? Well, a deadly secret is something that arises if you know something that other people really wish you didn't know. And the Lusitania's deadly secret can be read in this recruitment poster that was published in 1915 in Great Britain by the Parliamentary Recruitment Committee. In this poster, to my left, the Sea Maiden rises from the ocean very indignant. And what she's indignant about is the ship, the passenger ship, the Lusitania, that the Germans have just torpedoed in the Irish Sea. That was on May 7th, 1915. And you can see in the background of the Sea Maiden the sinking passenger liner, world's largest passenger liner, and struggling in the waters. If you look closely, you can see the unfortunate civilian passengers preparing to drown. 1,200 people drowned in this dreadful war crime. Well, the Sea Maiden's very indignant about it, and she raises her sword and she says, "Take up the sword of justice." Well, what does she mean by taking up the sword of justice? Well, what she meant would have been very obvious to anyone in 1915 who saw this poster, and hundreds of thousands of people saw it. What she meant was, take up the sword of justice by joining the British forces and then going out to fight the Germans. That was revenge for the Lusitania, and so that's the reason you should join the British forces, is revenge for the Lusitania, justice for the unfortunate victims. But the implication of her remarks and her point of view, which was also the artist's, is that the Germans were solely responsible for this horrible war crime. But what if the British were co-complicit in the war crime? What if the British actually stored explosives on board the ship so that when it was struck by a torpedo, the explosives stored secretly aboard the ship blew the ship apart, and that's why it went down in a mere 18 minutes. What if all of that were true? And what if you knew that that were true and were proposing to say so to the world? Well, this would be very disadvantageous from the British point of view, because this poster was intended to encourage volunteers, and if people are to think that the British were co-complicit with the Germans in this war crime, then why bother to volunteer for the British Army? Why bother to fight the British? Why bother to fight the Germans? They were both war criminals in this case. And also, a very important consideration for Great Britain at this time was the hope that the United States would come out of neutrality and enter the war against Germany. And to make that happen, the British needed to convince the Americans that the Germans alone were responsible for the crime of the Lusitania. So somebody who came along and said that he knew that munitions had been secretly stored in the Lusitania, that person would undermine the British war effort and threaten Great Britain with the loss of the war. Quite a serious threat to the British.